hospitality, dignity, and violence. Conversation on domestic violence and sexual assault on university campuses. My name is Eric Magnuson. I serve as an assistant professor of theology here at SAU, and I direct our master's program in spiritual formation and leadership. I know a few of you, but I don't know others, so that's very formal title garbage there, just for fun. Earlier today, in our 4:30 session, Professor Jeff Baker, our keynote speaker from McGraw University School of Law, talked to us a little bit about domestic violence and sexual assault on university campuses, but not just from a legal perspective, but specifically moving us toward a more holistic Christian vision of what it means for us to create communities of flourishing, where we can honor people's dignity, where we can help them recover their agency, where ultimately we can help live into the restorative, redemptive vision of what God's loving reign in the world is calling all of us to. I'm going to ask him here in a few minutes to go ahead and for those of you who were not here at our earlier session, to give us a sort of Cliff's Notes version of that. I know here we are in an academic environment, and so saying a phrase like Cliff's Notes should be taboo, but I'm going to deign to say it right here and right now. And ask him.
The Wikipedia version. No, you stole my joke.
This, I know. I am old. We've proven that, Professor Baker. For those of you who missed the earlier session, I will say this: Professor Baker and I have been colleagues, having conversations on interesting topics for a number of years. But we have been best friends for 22 years, since we met in July of 1993 at the freshman experience at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. We were wearing the same summer camp t-shirt. We saw one another. We had a moment. We've been best friends ever since. So
we used to have a blog.
We did, but that's long since died. Thanks be to God. I personally have been not just professionally prodded by Professor Baker's convictions and his academic work and his professional interests, but personally and spiritually as well, because what he does connects so deeply with all of the things that are at the core essence of my life as a theologian, as someone who's interested in Christian spirituality, as a parent, as a professor, as a father of 3 little girls who I believe are agents of their own lives, growing to be increasingly brilliant and strong. And we share so many of these convictions. So because of those things, it's a gift to me to be able to have someone who's been so vital in my own formation come to our campus to share with you all. So before he gives us the Wikipedia version of his earlier talk, I'm going to start with the far end here and invite the panel to go ahead and briefly introduce themselves.
I'm Mary Darling, and I teach in the Department of Communication and Media, and also in our Master's in Spiritual Formation and Leadership.
I'm Jen Letherer, and I teach in the same department as Mary, Communication and Media. I teach film studies, and I'm the director of the theater program. I'm also the head of the diversity committee, which is part of why I'm here, I think.
I'm Lori McVay, and I'm an affiliate professor in sociology, and I focus on gender, families, all sorts of good stuff.
McGraw, and I'm one of the assistant directors of Residence Life. There you go, new title this year. And I am the resident director of Lowell Hall and the Women's Key Houses.
All right, my name is Dan VanderHill. I'm assistant VP for student development and learning. I've been in a kind of a dean of students type role for the last 20 years or so, and to be more involved on some of the practical aspects, because for 15 years or so, 19 years or so, I was involved with anything that involves sexual misconduct from a disciplinary standpoint or an accountability standpoint. And most recently, I've added a role called Title IX Coordinator, and that has to do with meeting obligations that the federal government gives us in terms of sexual assault and violence and so on. So I think that's why I am in this panel.
Did you notice the deep conviction and certainty with which all of them expressed their participation here on this particular panel? Yes. Oh dear, there's some weird deep magic at work in my mind in gathering this particular group. I will say this though, I do have reasons for having invited each and every one of these people, and I won't go into all of that on an individual basis, but I do want to say this, that SAU prides itself on being a community of learners. We do a really good job of that. We were talking about this a little bit beforehand. We're beginning to do an increasingly great job of doing that in an interdepartmental way as academicians. But I think that one of the places that we have sort of a growing edge still to live into is to do that between the academic side of what we do here on campus and the rest of the student experience. Right? There's the very unfortunate thing that happened several centuries ago where what we might today call higher education, that started in the monastery, had a very holistic vision of life and formation, started to move from a very university type environment to a multi-versity type environment, and everything became very siloed. And this is, for me, one attempt to begin to really start unifying things on a bigger level here as a community, to open space for important conversations and dialogues. The final thing that I want to say right now before Professor Baker recaps for us is that tonight is the middle portion of an expanding conversation. Earlier today, we started with one individual person, as Professor Baker shared his keynote address with us. Tonight, we're expanding that to invite other voices to participate in dialogue with what he shared earlier, and from their own experiences academically, personally, and vocationally, as they're calling here on this campus. Tomorrow, we're going to take an even broader step and move from this kind of environment, where we are here speaking at you, to round tables, where we hope that you all will come back, invite your friends and others that you know to come be participants with us in conversation with one another. Because this isn't a conversation that should just remain an ethereal head game, or between people that have particular positions of power here on campus. But instead, it's one that we need to be having collaboratively in productive ways on our campus so that we can really move toward communal flourishing as a whole campus community.
I just had my 6th or 7th cup of coffee today, so I'm going to try to go fast and be useful because I'm on West Coast time. My name is Jeff Baker, and I'm a lawyer and a law professor, but one of the things that I have done and get to do is to work a lot around domestic violence, sexual assault, and the issues of justice that sort of surround that. So the Wikipedia version of my keynote address that all of these good folks got to hear, I will try to summarize this. But first, let me say this. I think that we have to talk about these issues without euphemism and without fear, and directly. But what that creates is the potential for tension and the potential for trauma or vicarious trauma or the memory of really hard stuff. So as we talk about this and as I talk about it, I'm going to use pretty direct language, and I think that only serves the conversation. But know that very likely that there are people in this room who have experienced abuse or witnessed it or know it in various ways, and so I just want to let you know what's coming. That's what we call a trigger warning, and I'm just putting it out there so that everybody can sort of know what's going on. Now, as a fundamental matter, this is what we know, what we think we know about domestic violence. And when I say that, I don't mean just like family violence. I mean dating violence. Another term for that is intimate partner violence, and that is a closely related phenomenon with sexual assault on college campuses. And I'm going to try to tie all those together for just a second. But here are some numbers that reflect reality as best we know it. 1 in 3 American women over the course of their lives will be victims of physical or sexual assault by a family member or someone they know. That works out to about 58 million people. That is 1/3 of all women. That's 1/6 of the population, and that is epidemic. That's like the level of like heart disease and car wrecks, right? I mean, this is a big, big deal. 1 in 5 women, as the best data we have, say 1 in 5 women will be sexually assaulted while they're in college, and that makes college more dangerous as it relates to sexual abuse for women in their young 20s than being just out in the world, and that is pretty intense. Also, we know that there is no difference in incidence and rates of domestic violence when you cross economic and social lines, including education, income, or religion, or race. So incidents of domestic violence and sexual assault are constant across all of those axes. So from people in poverty to people who are wealthy, from black people to white people, non-Christian people to Christian people, it all happens at the same time. Now probably, well, some of y'all are in here by coercion. Some of you have been induced to be here, like you're made to be here by your teachers, or you at least have a big incentive to be, not coercion, incentive to be here. So some of you may not be buying what I'm selling, and likely, if you're in this audience, some of you, and I'm not going to call you out, but some people will likely say, oh, but it happens to men too. Why are you pushing feminism on us? Why does this have to be a sex issue? Why are you talking about this? Why isn't this something else? To which I reply, the reality is anywhere between 85 and 90% of domestic violence and sexual assaults are perpetuated by men against women. That is the reality. That's where we are. And so I think that you can talk about this in a lot of different ways, but the most important frame and the most important explanation that we have for why this happens is that it's a gendered issue. There is something happening in the world, something happening in our culture, something happening in our history that creates a dynamic that causes this. So I'm really accelerating my process here. There is one statistically significant indicator about who will be an abuser and who will be a victim, and it is the same thing. And it is whether you saw abuse in your own home growing up. It's not the only indicator, it's the best indicator. And it's not to say that everybody who saw abuse in their home will become abusive or will become a victim, but that's why it's the best predictor. And that, I think, is because it sets a different expectation about what healthy relationships or normal relationships are. So if you have a normative view of what relationships are based on what you saw in your own home, then that's what you're typically going to expect. And so if there was someone in your home, if a father was abusive to a mother in whatever way, then that is what the young man in that home will expect to do as a man, or the young woman in that home will expect to endure in her home. And this goes especially true for traditional communities, which goes especially true in our context with Christian communities, and it goes especially true with evangelical communities, especially where we have a sense of headship and patriarchy, where we have men on a certain level and wives submitting to husbands. Now that is not to say that all churches that have a structure like that create abuse. It is to say that those structures can protect abusers and give shelter to people who are in certain situations. So these are some of my premises. Here's one more premise. Violence and sexual assault, physical contact, is our shorthand for something else. That this is really just one tool in the arsenal of someone who is trying to coerce someone else. So physical violence, sexual imposition is really just coercion. It is the attempt of one person to subjugate another so that you get that person to do what you want them to do against their will. And that can happen in emotional ways, it can happen in spiritual ways, financial ways. You're a poor college student, so it may not be financial yet, but it will be, where someone has financial leverage over you. It can happen through child dependency, it can happen through immigration status, it can happen through 1,000 different ways. But in essence, it is the moment of control over someone else, and violence becomes the way that someone escalates that when someone is getting out of their control. So all that to say this, it is happening on this campus because it happens on every campus. It is happening in your dorms, it is happening in your relationships because it happens everywhere. And very likely, statistically, out of a group this size, we have women who have been abused, and we have some men who have done some abusing. And we have some men who have abused. 1 in 8 men are sexually assaulted in this country over the course of their lives. So we're talking about something that is really resonant and present, but that because of its nature becomes suppressed in silence and shame and embarrassment. And in certain communities, and not especially, but in particularly a community like this, the culture of being sexually pure and being in some kind of faithful church environment can create a sense of silence and shame and embarrassment that then can also be perpetuated by an abuser to use that shame as more leverage for even more control. So what I was calling us to do was to move into like the legal and regulatory schemes like Title IX and Clery Act and other things that sort of protect our communities, but to move past that as a matter of Christian community and higher education to say we need to create cultures of dignity and love and peace where every person is an image bearer of God and receives the kind of love that they would want to give to someone else. So that was Wikipedia in 9 minutes. Coffee.
Come and good night. All right, so in wonderful Wikipedia fashion, everybody, as an open source enterprise, has the opportunity to engage in conversation, to modify and edit all of the mistakes that Professor Baker has made. But I am interested in hearing each of you take a minute just to respond to the way that his material has encountered you, whether that's on a personal, a professional, or an intellectual basis. Okay.
All right, I don't know that in the Wikipedia version you use the word justice very much, but what I heard that word, and it's a word that I love, because we serve a God who loves justice, and that's actually a verse, I, the Lord, love justice. And so a couple different times you had talked about this as being a justice issue. I don't think we have to think very hard before we realize that it is, and God wants us to work against any injustice, and so that's one of the things that I was hearing, and Eric knows my love for this topic, so I think I know why I was invited. And the other thing that, some thoughts that were raised from listening earlier was our use of language, and so I think it is so important that we pay attention to how we talk, and you did go into that a little bit more earlier, so if anybody has a question about that, the importance of language and the language that, words that we use and the words that we don't use when we are talking about this topic. We all welcome those questions, but I think we often don't think about the kinds of things that we say that can be really harmful to a woman's dignity. And so I won't go into any of those examples right now, but I'm hoping that we'll have a further conversation about that.
Eric, you asked, or you mentioned personal, professional, and academically, and I guess my response would be to say that this subject hits me on all 3 levels, pretty importantly. Personally, having members of my own family who have been affected in this manner, and because of the number of students who've come to me, and I'm just their professor, and granted, they might get to know me very well doing theater because 11 o'clock at night when the set is half built and we've been here for 4 months. You call me Jen, and you know a lot about me, and I know a lot about you. That happens. I've heard stories, and I can't tell you that I had, was it about 4 semesters in a row that I had students sitting across the office from me that I said, I can't help you as much as someone else should. You need to talk to someone about what's happening in your life or what's happening in your past. And I'm saying this to you, and you know this, because you're the students and you talk to each other, and you know what's happening on campus. You should know that we know it's happening on campus and that it's a part of your life. So personally, I know it affects you, and it affects me too. Professionally, it does, because I'm in the business of teaching people, and I'm in the business of telling stories. And part of this is about making identity, and part of this is about claiming identity. And so being able to tell your own story gives you agency. And so the idea of stories matter, stories change things, stories change the way that we view things. Academically and professionally, I would guess that's kind of where it seems to hit me, kind of right between the eyes.
So when I think about this topic, first of all, I get terrified because I feel like I should know all the things. And I think that's the beauty of a panel like this, is that you realize there's no way for you to know every nuance. And I think when we talk to students, that sometimes they feel powerless to do anything. And part of what that reflects from a sociological point of view is the systems in which we operate. That even if we are not committing violence against someone else, if we use gender-inclusive language, we still operate within broader systems, within scripts that our social world helps us construct, that do perpetuate those attitudes, and that give some people permission to treat others in ways that are dehumanizing. And so when I think of it, I think of it that way. I also think about growing up in a home where my mother was spoken to very disrespectfully, and I repeatedly saw that, and the confusion that followed when I married a guy who talked to me like I was his equal, and I was like, wait, what's going on? I don't really know how to handle this. Yeah, and now my dad is a great guy, but he grew up and operated in a flawed system. So that's kind of what I would talk about.
For me, when I was listening, I just saw faces flash through my mind, like faces of girls that I've talked to in my office, in my apartment, in their room, and just really broken people in really broken places. And getting flashback, even just this weekend, I have a girl that was a resident of mine years ago, hasn't gone here for years, who was in a totally different place, and it reminded her of a place where she was when she was sexually assaulted or an attempt was made, and she called me in a panic attack. Like, I can't move right now, like, just talk to me. And I was like, I have nothing, I don't know what to talk about, So I'm like talking about whatever, and finally, my son, my 3-year-old son was right there, and she knows him, she's interacted with him, so I was like, Malachi, you remember so-and-so, like, say hi. And so he just started talking, he was talking about school, and talking about life, and, I mean, whatever a 3-year-old talks about, Legos, talking about everything. And her voice changed, and she was talking to him, which was really sweet, so I was like, I don't know if it's okay to put him on the phone, because, like, what if this is terrifying to him, but, like, I don't know what to say. So he just talked, and it was cool, because all of a sudden, at one point, she's like, okay, Kelly, I'm at my car. Okay, great, I'm so glad that you made it there. And so then it was late, so my son's getting ready to go to bed, so I just went in the room, just talked to her, and, I mean, that's one short story, but there are lots of stories. So I guess that's kind of where I interact with this situation, not in a very academic way, but in a way of just being that person's like, I don't know what to say, but I'll listen and I'll care.
Teaching about this subject on campus is strange at a Christian college campus, because there used to be anyway this idea maybe that this doesn't happen very often. So how do you, the federal government requires us to teach everybody about this now. So how do you get at that? And I think you have to have a good theology of creation, fall, and redemption, right? That ideally, if we were to love the Lord our God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves, we wouldn't need any laws. Nobody would be doing anything wrong if they did that perfectly. But we're fallen, so there is every kind of evil right here in a Christian space, right? So to make it more acceptable to everyone to hear, something that I've learned is to be practical, is to talk to people about what they can do for a friend who may experience this, how they can be a bystander that intervenes. Because if you're talking to the smallest percentage out there, you're going to lose everybody else, right? So we're learning about that. I welcome, although there's pressure, you feel like the Department of Education is looking over your shoulder, waiting for you to mess up on something and get sued. And in fact, our council would tell us they are to a certain extent. But I do welcome the attention that's been given to it, because I think as an institution we are improving processes and care and support that we offer through our whole health and wellness center, or through campus safety, or through our resident directors, through increased training. And probably, frankly, unfortunately, it's hard for me to admit, but that wouldn't happen to the same extent without pressure from the federal government. So while maybe we resent and fear litigation and things like that, on the other hand, I welcome it because we have done a better job doing things like this and bringing it out into the open and talking about it and training, getting ready for the worst things that happen. So we're trying to continually improve, and it's intimidating.
I like a number of things that are said. So I got lots of rabbits that I would love to chase right now, but I want to bring these last two in conversation with one another a little bit and ask you all to expand on it for me and help me out. So Jeff, Professor Baker, in what he said that yes, there are these legal requirements out there. But as Christian people, as a Christian community, these should be like minimal standards for our common life. Now, what I hear you saying is, but these are the things that we needed to actually sort of be the jumper cables to start us, to get us running. So we have that on the one hand. But then also we have the difficult nature of being a place where these kind of conversations are really talked about a whole lot, especially in public settings. A lot of teaching even can happen behind the safety of a computer screen, where I can go and read what legally will get SAU off the hook in the privacy of my own office. And we've met the legal requirement, but yet it doesn't necessarily change our community's life together, right? So how can we begin the process of using the legal requirement not so much as a standard that we just want to need to become a springboard to imagine a different type of common life? And I'm wondering how that intersects a 3-year-old with Legos being able to create the space for a new possibility, to be able to walk to a car, right? So I'm wondering how these two come together. I think that they do, but I'm not smart enough to figure that out. So I'm asking you all to figure that out for me.
I think one of the things is this conversation that's happening right now. I mean, as we were talking about over dinner, part of the idea is that if we open up the conversation and you all now, because you're part of the conversation, you understand that there is a conversation taking place. So Kelly on the phone is going, I don't know what I can do, but I can listen. And I think a lot of us have been in that spot, and probably you have too. I have a friend who's going through something, I'm not sure what I can do, but I can listen. And hearing that I'm not alone in knowing that, and that perhaps the best thing, if I don't know what else to do, is at least to listen to them, and having a conversation here about it. I think that's part of the jumpstart too, or that's the thing that comes after the jumpstart, which is, okay, well, let's begin to have a conversation and let's see where that goes.
Something that I think in terms of advocacy and activism and lawsuits and community organizing and political power, that's a little bit more cynical than the theologians and the social workers and the people. But so this is what I would like to say. I don't want y'all to just have to listen to us, but I will say this, and this was convicting to me. I've said a couple of times tonight that this can't just be about legal compliance. It can't just be about risk and liability. It has to be something else. That note, that lesson came to me from a young woman named Dana Bolger. And Dana Bolger is the founder of a student activism. I'm sorry, Dana, this is going to hurt. There's a student activism website called Know Your Nine. It's KNOW, your 9, IX. That's Know Your Title 9. If you look up knowyour9.com, they've got incredible resources there for student organizing and student activism. That's why I'm apologizing to you, because they're going to be activists against you, and I get to go home. But Dana Bolger, no kind of Christian, secular feminist, Ivy League. She went to Brown. There was a huge controversy, maybe it was Dartmouth, huge controversy around some stuff that was happening at her place, and they organized in their place. And so it was not Christians who were sending that message, but it sort of shames me to say it ought to have been. And we ought to be leading these conversations. And I think that sometimes as Christians, and I've only ever taught in Christian schools, we think that we are somehow immune from this stuff, and we're not. And conversely, when we think we are, then that puts our heads in the sand just a little bit. And so this kind of stuff, these kind of conversations, this is where it's at. So long as you get to have these conversations too, and then what I have seen time and time again in my now 10 years of doing this work is when one person tells a story, the next person, and the next person tells a story, and the next person tells a story, and then all of a sudden you realize this isn't isolation, it's not shame, you're not crazy, you're not alone, and that creates power, political power, and then spiritual power, and then community, which is what we know this all has to be. So I mean, I think what you did was brilliant, because you connected with her not as a problem to solve, but as a human who needed love in that moment and some kind of compassion. And the thing that you knew how to do was to connect her to your kid. And I think that's just fabulous, and then it gave her the lifeline to humanity and to God that she had to have. So I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, so hear that story again, right? If you are a friend of a victim, you too can be a restorer of a person's agency, just like a 3-year-old can talking about Legos. In getting on a phone, your 3-year-old helps that person be able to have the strength to move a step, to begin to walk toward a car when she was paralyzed before, right? So and we can say these kind of things on a campus like this, right? This is the upside down wisdom of the loving reign of God, right? Okay. A second thing I want to say is that though Jeff and throwing out Know Your 9 and stuff is thinking that he might be causing a rift between you all and us, we've tried to build into this thing the very opposite. In fact, the very idea that all of us would be up here collaborating together with you all knowing full well that tomorrow is about all of us collaborating together in an even more intentional way. What we're hoping to do is that it will not be an adversarial relationship that forms out of this, where it is about an unfortunately polarized politic. But instead, what we're doing is we're creating a common politic where we are moving together as a unified whole, as a unified group.
Can I say something about how I see it come together? What I really appreciated about, kind of more of our push towards Title IX is just the awareness to hear that in conversation with students, to hear the little things that start to show you there's something more going on here. And I think that in us learning more about these topics, we're starting to see wait a minute, as I'm talking, this isn't quite adding up. Why doesn't this we're missing a piece, And I think that that's something that anybody can do as you're hearing people's stories, is saying, wait a minute, I hear what you're saying, but then in your head, this doesn't quite add up. What else is there? And creating space for them to share what else is there, and allowing them the time that they need, or the comfortable space that they need, or the relationship that needs to come before they feel comfortable to share. But I think that what has been great about our greater awareness of it, with even the legality of it, is saying like, okay, these are things we need to be actively listening for because this is here. So how do I actively listen, and then how do I create space? And I think that push has been really helpful.
This is kind of a side note, and it's a little bit of a tangent, but I've seen it happen, and so I feel like it's worthwhile to say, and that is that I agree with you. This is, I think we all have stories of, and you all have stories of people who've come to you and spoken to you, but it's in a culture, especially a Christian culture in which millennials want to help others. I think you need to be aware, just as we need to be aware, those of us who may have worked with people in these kinds of scenarios, that you don't save anyone, that God saves people, and that it can very easily fall into a trap of someone calls me on the phone and then they call me every time they have a panic attack, and I have to figure out a way to set a good boundary and help them. And that's why people like Dan are really important, because there are resources here, and because it will take a village in many ways. And so, and I say this as someone who has no training, very little training at least. And so I think that's something for you to be aware of as well. We want you to listen to friends. We're having a conversation here about being able to come alongside people, but there's a difference between doing that and going, this person needs me, it's good to be needed, I'm going to throw everything into taking care of them, and in the process lose myself, and in the process forget God's place in all of that.
Another note on that, we have a cultural tendency to want to rescue people, and there's an incredibly powerful distinction between pity and compassion. And it's very easy to say, I will swing, and guys, perhaps I'm essentializing here, maybe this is sexist too, but we're sort of trained up in the world to be like the hero, right? To go solve that problem. We see this a lot in, like churches, like people trying to move to certain cultures and trying to like rescue them out of poverty and all of that. You can easily become the next person in a long line of people who have told her what to do. Like, you have to leave that relationship, you have to go get counseling, you have to go to this, you have to go to the dean, you have to call the cops, you have to do this. When that is a continuation of the same kind of, not the same kind of coercion, but the same flavor of coercion that has gotten to that person in the first place. And so, so the object of that game really isn't and shouldn't be to rescue someone. It's to pull up alongside them in a compassionate way, and then walk with them through that process to give them power, to give them their own power. So a client would say to us, should I get a protection order? Don't you think that'll make him mad? And we used to give advice, and then we stopped giving advice, and we said, you are the expert in your own relationship. All we can do is help you get where you want to be. So where do you want to be? And then let's strategize about how to do that, rather than saying, this is what you need to do next. And along those lines, I want to modify my comments just a minute ago, because you were right to sort of call me on that. I didn't mean to, and I inadvertently did do, but I shouldn't have, set up a controversy and an adversarial, I'm a lawyer so I do that, but an adversarial relationship between students and the dean. It really ought not to be that. I think this is the note I meant to hit. You don't have to wait on the grown-ups, right? You don't have to wait on the leadership or the faculty or the deans or the whoever to solve this, right? You are grown-ups. You are becoming who you are in a formative way, and so you can take some power over your own communities too, right? I mean, this isn't just flowing out of the dean's office. It's not just flowing out of the RAs and the RDs. I mean, you have the power to do something about this, and so there are resources out there to do it. I'm talking too much.
Yeah, no, I wanted to build on what you guys have been saying. Every semester I say to my students, if we can't have conversations here, then the things that we can't have conversations about here, we're also not going to have conversations about once we leave Spring Arbor. And so you are in a place right now where you have the gift of being able to sit in a classroom and disagree with your peers, to disagree with your professors, to disagree with people in authority, and it is a safe space. And so I think coming from the viewpoint of someone who teaches, that it is our responsibility to you to create a safe space where people can speak respectfully to each other and disagree respectfully and learn about other people's viewpoints, because that is, to me, one of the biggest things that's going to help dismantle a culture in which this sort of domestic violence and sexual assaults is much more common than it should be.
This maybe doesn't have the best flow, but I'd like to put it in there because there's things to really love about Spring Arbor University and the sweet community that we have. One thing that's not in the statistics, and I should have memorized this, and maybe Dr. Jeff, you could back me up on it, but 75% of sexual assaults, alcohol or drugs are involved.
I don't know if that's true. I'm sorry, I can't back you up.
I wish I could check that out.
I don't know that you're wrong either, though.
But it is a high percentage
It's a high percentage.
of sexual assaults that occur in that environment. Not that we don't have that environment, that undercurrent at Spring Arbor, but it's not the Thursday night norm, the frat boy culture that's trying to score on the drunk co-ed, you know. So be proud of where you're at and own that. That's not to say that we don't have, you know, no alcohol involved in their sexual assault. There is. But it is different here, and it's something to celebrate. While at the same time acknowledging that every vice exists here too.
I loved your example, Kelly, because if you notice in the title of this time together, the word hospitality is in the title, and I was intrigued by that at first. I was thinking, hospitality, I don't usually see that in the title with domestic violence and sexual abuse, and I was thinking of the hospitality, you know, the welcoming spirit of what you did with your friend, and there's so much hospitality that we can show when we listen. You know, when we listen and when we ask questions. And the more that we listen, the more that we can discover possible clues that another person wasn't aware of. And I think one of the things that troubles me about this issue is, well, it goes back to what you were saying about the home and what people have experienced in the home and how that becomes, I can't remember how you stated it, I wrote it down, but it was how that becomes their norm. And so that's what they're used to, that's what they see. When you're 5 years old and that's what's happening in your home, you think that's the norm. You don't know that that's not happening in other homes. And so what's really scary to me about this issue is that we can be so unaware of what abuse really is. We can have situations where we are in an abusive situation and we are totally unaware of that. And so I think to show hospitality to people, part of that is to listen to their story and to say, I had a friend who was in an unfortunate situation growing up, and we knew each other ever since we were 6 years old. And she said something to me as an adult that I'll never forget. She said, I'm so grateful for your mom and dad and for all the times that they welcomed me and that she did things with our family, because it didn't work to do things with her family, and we'll go into that. But it wasn't a good situation, and she said, your family welcomed me and it showed me what a normal family was, because I didn't realize what I was growing up in. And so I think when we listen to people, we can help them to see what is in what we call the range of normal and what is not, and we can ask some questions. And I think that's a really important way to show hospitality.
I'm glad you picked up on the word hospitality, and since I'm guilty for choosing it, I want to reflect on it a little bit. Because I think, unfortunately, in Christian context, we've been so shaped by culture that we tend to associate hospitality with Martha Stewart or Southern living. Right? I mean, this is what it means to be hospitable. We throw a big party where everything has to be immaculately clean at our house, and we invite the people that we want to invite. But hospitality, xenophilia, is the love of the stranger or the other. And that is what I want to get at here. That true hospitality is creating the space in your life, listening is the right word, creating space in your life to receive one another in all of your particularity, in all of your messy, beautiful otherness. and creating a space there where you would receive that, so that through this hospitality, through receiving one another, you're both changed in the process. Now, this is the kind of thing I think that begins to move us toward communal transformation, right? Where we're not just dealing with things in our own little inner life, but we're creating space through opening our lives to one another, that we can truly listen, and that we trust, because we're Christian, we trust that God is somewhere in the midst of that, doing the kind of God stuff that God does, which is about redemption and beauty and the restoration of dignity and wholeness. But that happens because of the Christian conviction of hospitality, love of the other. So that's where I was going with that.
I want to say to you students, like, I think that you guys are having these conversations, and probably more of you than we even know, because I don't know that I've had any resident come to me that hasn't already told a friend, or two, or the friend has come and said, look, I'm concerned. This is what I was told, and I have no idea what to do with it. Like, I don't know either, but they have great resources. And so that's why I want to encourage you guys too, because I think a lot of you are willing to engage in these conversations. I think you have. An important piece for you guys to know too is what resources Spring Arbor does have, so that you can be directing the people in your life, or maybe not just the university, but the community of the Jackson County community has, so you can be directing the people in your life who have experienced these things and are coming to you to the appropriate place. Because like Jen and others have said, you can't save them, I can't save them, we can't, I mean, only God can save them, but they can receive help beyond what any of us in this room can probably give them. But they are great resources. So that too, I just want to acknowledge to you guys too that we know that you're also having these conversations. These are not things that people are just coming to us about.
One of the things that Jeff said that I think is really important, and we're talking at dinner about the idea of being agency, like that I have my own agency, is that, you know, instead of being one in the long line of people who tell somebody what else to do, but when there are resources to be able to say, you're not alone. I'm willing to listen. There are others who are willing to listen, and that it might take some time, and it might take a host of resources which you can avail yourself of, because you have the agency to do that, and we're here to support you, which are going to help you to restoration, which are going to help you to those kinds of things. And that might be helpful for you as you're having these conversations, because we're sure that you are, to know that, to go, okay, well, I don't know what to do in this situation. I can listen, do I tell them about this, do I tell them about that? Sometimes it's worth your while simply to listen and to present options to them that they may not know about, and then be there and encourage them.
As long as we're talking about resources, let me direct your attention to the resource table at the back of the room. You could grab some of those things on the way out if you would like, or take a look at them.
So we talked a little bit about the ways that, the subtle ways that we are culturally shaped in such a way that it doesn't necessitate particular types of behaviors or responses, but it does make it easier. So I'm going to unfortunately talk in some ways that could be considered gender essentialist, and I almost sort of apologize for that. But I think that in ways they are helpful broad brushstrokes, and I sometimes talk to my students about it, and I think it can be helpful. We live in a culture where the dominant liturgy that shapes our life is American football. And think about that as a cultural liturgy. You're asking men to get bigger and bigger, stronger and more powerful, to colonize space and take over an opponent, while smaller and smaller and more scantily and scantily clad women are on the sidelines cheering them on. Think about that as your dominant. When is the majority of football, like the biggest money-making football played? When? Well, it's Super Bowl, but it's on Sundays, right? Now, you could leave your worship service and go home and watch 10 hours straight of football. Which of those liturgies is going to shape you more for your life with others in the world? That's an insidious one, right? We can see the way that works out. We can see how we can begin slowly. And I love football. I have a really, this is what academics does to you, right? It really makes everything really conflicted inside. I love football. Goodness. So that's when we can kind of see that. We can project out what the insidious ends of this might be, right? Okay, let me talk about a different one, though, that hits even closer to home, and it will for my good friend, Professor Baker, as well, since we both have roots in a place where chivalry was very, very important to us. A couple of years ago, I was at a conference. For any of you who discovered that all of a sudden, the week before Thanksgiving, all of your theology classes are canceled, it's because the big religion and theology nerd conference happens that weekend every year. So this was when I was in Baltimore with one of my brilliant Christian feminist ethicist friends, and we were walking along, and she's your friend as well. But as a lawyer, he wasn't at the theology nerd conference. As we were walking around to various things, going to restaurants, going to plenary events, going to side breakout sessions, I would always, as we started nearing any building, I would slowly speed up so that I could open the door. This is deeply ingrained in my Oklahoma bones. This has nothing to do with sexism, right? This is just me showing general kindness. But what I was doing was unintentionally taking away her agency to be able to open the door on her own. And she pointed this out to me because she knows that I'm concerned about these things. She said, "You know what you're doing, don't you? I love you enough, and I know that you trust me enough that I can say this to you, and you will actually hear it," which I received as a great compliment. Obviously, it humbled me greatly, but it has changed the way that I walk around this campus now. If I happen to get to a door first, I will open it for somebody, male or female. If someone else is getting there, I will receive the gift of them holding that door for me if they want to do that, male or female. And it has been an intentional, conscious effort that I've had to make because it's not a part of the way I was trained. It's not a part of the natural liturgy of my life. But it was an important counter liturgy that she invited me into that I think has, it's changed the way that I view other people. And it's giving them an opportunity to maintain some of their own agency and to offer me the gift of it, just like I would offer them the gift of my agency when I have that chance.
And this is a great chance to get it for all you sociology nerds. What he's talking about is socialization. And, you were saying, I don't want to sound essentialist, and I don't want to, boil it down to all men are like this and all women are like this, but our society shapes men and women with particular expectations, and football is a great example because there are very few emotions that are acceptable for men to have. But when you go to a football game, guys, you are allowed to have them all, and you can vicariously crush your opponents. So, yeah, our culture tells us men are supposed to do this. Men are supposed to look like this. Men are not supposed to do these things. Women are supposed to look like this. They're supposed to let you open the door for them. You're just being nice. I told her she has great legs. I mean, she should appreciate me saying that to her. Should she? There's we label these things in different ways. Benevolent sexism is one of the things that people tend to talk about when we talk about this. Well, I was trying to be helpful. I was trying to make her feel better about herself. But what you might actually have been doing is telling her, well, you're not really okay as a person, but this part of you looks pretty good. I mean, let's be honest. So there's that fine line between appreciating someone for who they are and reducing that person to a part of their body or a specific attribute. And it's not that, we spring forth from the womb and say, I grew up to be sexist, yeah! But we have dominant, maybe one of you did, and congratulations to you if you did that. You need sociology. But yes, but we swim in these cultures. We are surrounded by them. In the media, we are surrounded by it. Facebook, Twitter, social media, all these things teach us what it means to be a gendered person and what the hierarchy is of who has the power. And that intersects with a lot of other things: race, class, gender, physical ability. All of these things interact in ways that are very important to help us know where we rank in the social hierarchy. And domestic violence and sexual assault come out of that system.
Eric mentioned the liturgy of football, which is, I'd never thought of it being on Sundays. It's brilliant. But I talk a lot about another liturgy, and that's the liturgy of the movies. And by the way, probably you've gone to church in a place which looks a lot like a movie theater. They dim the lights over you. You're supposed to look at the stage, and you are supposed to passively accept an emotional thing which is happening at you. They make a lot of churches that look like movie theaters. Yeah. So when you're watching movies, this is another place in which a lot of subtle things happen. I quickly want to talk about the door story to mention how often I hold open a door for people and men look embarrassed. So that's a real thing. It happens a lot. I'm simply holding out the door to be polite and guys will look embarrassed. And I don't know if it's because I'm a professor or a woman or both. And I'm not even thinking about that. I just know that there's someone behind me and I'm opening the door. It might be a maternal instinct, but gee, then am I being, gender essentialist, that kind of thing.
It's a tough world.
Right? A few years ago, I was at a conference with a colleague whose name is Annalie Ward. I asked her to be on this panel. We were talking about our experience in movies. And so she started talking about the movie Gran Torino, if anybody remembers this, that Clint Eastwood made. And she said, I walked out of this and I had brothers who had muscle cars, and I really liked that movie. And then about 10 minutes later, it kind of hit me that the only female characters in that film were an old lady, so not a lot of agency in her life anymore, and a woman who is assaulted. The only women in the film are people who have no agency. And then you begin to study Hollywood culture, movies and television shows, and the only active women tend to be witches. And another word that sounds like that I can't say in this setting. And that's the vast majority of females portrayed in films. And you say, oh, well, that's so archaic, it's so whatever, blah, 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 blah. If you watch films, start counting them. Yeah, exactly. And start doing these things which are the easy ways in which you can see, in which the things which you would think of as normal and benign are really giving you a normal which is not necessarily a great picture of the way that things ought to be or could be. And half of it is awareness. Half of it is the idea of going, wait a minute, here's something that has a powerful influence on my life. And when I take a closer look at it, I get conflicted. And I think that that's where a lot of us are, and a lot of us, know you are going to be there, and might be pushing you there, and know that that's okay, I guess. That's the other thing I want you to know. Like, when you're watching movies, to be conflicted about it, and to go, wait a minute, I loved Gran Torino, but I hated Gran Torino at the same time. If you've had me in class, I talk about how much I loved the first half of the film Enchanted, and I hated the second half of the film when she saves herself by pulling out her credit card and buying clothes so that she can look right for a guy. Yeah, like the first half of this movie is brilliant. We get really conflicted. That's okay. It's okay to be watching something and go, this has an influence on me, but wait a minute. There's something about this which I enjoy, which resonates with me, and it might be that it's funny or it reminds me of something, or I associate with my childhood. But there might also be something about this which I need to question, because I need to question whether or not I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with that being the same way that I see the world, or the way that I interact with other people.
That's all very helpful. Because I'm in the world of spiritual formation, I think about these moments where we are conflicted. more often than not, when there is some kind of an inner turmoil or disturbance or moment where we're feeling conflicted, it's an invitation to something. And we think about this, because we're an academic institution, we think about this in a very broad way. Intellectual confliction is an invitation to learn something new or learn something more deeply, to evaluate maybe for the first time a presupposition that has been exposed, like that nerve in your tooth that all of a sudden the enamel wears just enough that nerve is exposed. It's an invitation to kind of explore what's going on there. Spiritually, this happens as well. We feel those moments where we're conflicted. We ask, okay, what's going on here relationally? Same thing. So these are invitations. They're invitations to deeper personal and communal change, opportunities for growth and transformation. So I'm curious. I could keep going all night, I think, right now. This is probably that last cup of coffee I had. If you couldn't tell, Professor Baker and I share a coffee addiction. That's right. That's actually help. I've lost my agency to caffeine. So I'm wondering, for you all, are there any? We've been talking about human dignity. We've been talking about what it means to people, hospitality. We've been talking about little moves against the destructiveness of violence. So for you all, what would you say would be a good, simple practice or habit that you would invite our students to live into in their lives that can help them make their own little moves against violence, offer some hospitality, or the restoration?
Well, let's talk football. I didn't want to stop you, were you? Okay, all right. So before I answer that, let me just say that if you are a Lions fan, this might be a good time to give up Sunday football. And if you're a Michigan fan, you can just move it to Saturday. So, the sports, the whole idea of sports is a good place to start. Because I think we have to be really careful of our language, and I appreciate what you were saying about, you can love something and you can hate it, so you can think something is funny and then go, oh, I really shouldn't think that is funny, I have to stop that. And we've talked about language, and so there are some things that we say that can be very offensive to women, and I think we have to remember that all these examples that we're talking about build a foundation. And then we might not even know what we're swimming in, we're not paying attention to what we're swimming in, and so we don't realize the effect that our language can have. So there are things that we say that I don't think we realize what we're saying. So I think we have to pay attention to our words. We have to pay attention to when we say man up. And we have to pay attention to when we say, well, you throw like a girl. And things like that. Again, I can laugh at that, and then I go, oh, what am I really laughing at? What am I really saying there? And I know that even the throwing like a girl is being reclaimed. There was I think it was a commercial or something. What was that? Dove, yes. But I think a simple way to start is to listen to what we're saying and to pay attention to the words that we use.
Thanks for pointing that out, because even that attempt to reclaim means that it's subverting and pointing out the problematic nature of the previous definition.
I think the thing that goes along with that is to not laugh when someone else makes the joke. When someone's saying something and they're using language which constitutes being offensive or something which you think is probably not really funny, you don't have to laugh. You don't have to make them feel good about it. You can be like, dude, that's not funny. Maybe dude's not the right word. My niece was telling me some jokes that, some jokes in her high school, and she slipped in a racial joke, and she goes to a small high school, and I looked at her and I said, Sarah, that's not funny. Well, he just meant it to be funny, and I said, it's not It's not funny. Now, I'm her aunt, so it's a little bit easy for me to say that. And you know, you don't want to be the person who spoils the conversation, like, oh man, you have to be that person. I would encourage you to be that person. You'll feel better about it later.
Right? Be the feminist culture. Be it.
Yeah.
Racist.
Yeah. I do think that something that can happen here is that we say, okay, I don't know what to say. I don't know if I can say anything because it might be offensive. And that's where, I think bottom line for this, we have to afford each other grace. Instead of going, I can't believe you just said that. You know, we can use it as a teachable moment. Even if I laugh and I go, oh my, I didn't mean to laugh. I'm not supposed to laugh at that. You know, I mean, you can turn that into a conversation. But I think it's really important to afford ourselves grace and to make sure that we're affording other people grace when we're trying to work through this language issue and this whole issue.
The other thing that I'll mention before I pass the mic on to Lori is a shameless plug, actually, because I'm doing Community of Learners on November 20th. I'm talking about my book. Actually, my book's on ideology, and it's basically a guide to watching movies. That's what I wrote because I feel so strongly about this issue that I know how movies influence me, and I get caught up in them, and I forget that every movie is always telling you that this is worthwhile or this is good. Heroes act that way. Heroines act this way. And I mean, if you were in my writing class today, we were watching the Looney Tunes. We were talking about how there's ideology in a Looney Tune. There just is. And if you can have empowerment, you can have agency over what you watch, over the liturgy of what you are doing, that empowers you to go, okay, I'm watching this, but I'm no longer passively taking in messages from the media. And as a media person, that's a big deal to me, that you're passively taking in messages from advertising, from television, from movies, from the cat videos you're watching on YouTube. You're taking those in, but you can, in a sense, take back remote control and say, okay, but I don't have to agree with everything this is telling me. I can still love the Avengers, but I can have a problem with this. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, for the record, Scarlett Johansson literally had to stop eating to fit into her Black Widow costume. Yeah, she did.
I'm upset about that.
No, sorry, I know, I love it. We'll talk later. I try. You can just call me Loki. I have to work it in there somewhere. Like all my students know, they're like, oh. Yes, two things. First of all, I've had conversations with students where they say, I'm on board with this. My parents really don't get it. That's okay. It's okay to go gently in relationships because your parents are from a different generation. Your parents might even be older than us. I'm just saying. Yeah. I know, but.
This has been a very long night.
But.
I wish they were younger.
I know. Yes, but remember that. Not everybody's going to be on the same page, and it might be really difficult to have these sorts of conversations with family members. It is for me. I grew up in the South. These are difficult conversations. These are not necessarily things you bring up at Christmas dinner. Sometimes they come up at Christmas dinner, and you have to choose whether you just sit there awkwardly. Yes, but it's okay, and you don't have to feel like you need to completely ruin and reject a relationship because, yes, it's very good to stand up and say, what you said is not okay, but then there's follow-up after that. There's relationship after that. That's a really good thing to keep in mind. The second thing that I want to say is that all of us live at the intersection of our own lives and all of history. In sociology, we call that the sociological imagination, being able to look at your life, your biography, and see where it fits with everything else. So whenever you are thinking about this issue and thinking about whether or not you agree with what we've said and thinking about people you know to whom things have happened or people who have done things, consider that you are also a product of all of history and of everything else that's going on around you.
So we're supposed to give one piece of advice, and I'm going to give you one piece of advice, and I mentioned this in my keynote, I'm going to try to be short. If you have someone in mind tonight, like if there is someone in your life who you think is in a relationship that troubles you, that you suspect there's abuse, even if there's not violence, if there's some kind of coercion, address that with that person. Talk to them at the very least to say, I'm worried about you, this is alarming to me, this is trouble. But here's my real advice. Don't expect, sometimes there's a temptation to say, so now what are you going to do about it? Like, you're going to leave them or are you going to ignore me, right? And what I would like to say is register that concern. Let them know. Let them hear from you that you are concerned, that you are there, that you are ready to be a shelter for them. But then be patient and wait, because it may take a long time for them to come around and see what you see. And there's a temptation to say, well, you know what, she's asking for it. Like, we live in an age of accountability and individualism, and if that's the choice she wants to make, then those are the consequences she's going to have to live with. But there may be a whole lot of stuff that's wrapped up in there that's going to take a long time for her to unravel before she can get to a place of feeling like she can be liberated from whatever that relationship is. So approach her, express your love and concern, and then wait and be ready to catch that fallout when it happens. And not to be gone somewhere because you think she got what she deserved. So be really patient with other people, and don't let your own story be your normative standard by which you gauge everybody else's story, because your story is just yours, not everybody else's. So be really humble about where you live in relationship with them, and then be ready to receive their story, and then when they are ready to give it.
That was one thing I was going to say.
Sorry.
No. Don't expect a quick fix from your friends or relatives, number one. Number two, I want to say, really, if you're gonna speak into someone's life, like, know what you're talking about. Not like you have to have all the answers. Not like you have to know, all the academic things and the exact right thing to do, but like, I think especially on this campus, there's so much misconception as far as like what will happen to someone if this comes out. And I think that it's sometimes perpetuated by students, because I know I'm not saying it, but someone is. Or it's out there, it's this idea. And so before you silence someone, or even like allow people to sit in silence out of fear, learn what we actually do, learn how people can care. Because, I hope it wouldn't sit well with anybody that, like, someone would get kicked out if they're a victim of assault. Like, does that sit well? Like, that doesn't sit well with me to think about. So if there's something like that that's out there, and you're like, this doesn't sit well with me, like, is that really right? This doesn't line up with what I know about Spring Arbor. Come ask someone, because that's not right. And I think that there could be more freedom and more space to hear and to learn and to listen and to share if some of those misconceptions were not out there. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to get that information out there, but you guys are like on the ground level. You're with your friends, you're out there, like, you are living with them, you're in community with them. You are great people to share this information. You trust each other, you care for each other, you love each other in the big things and the little things. So when it comes to something like this, if you have the correct information, you bring so much power. And you bring more power than I think even what we can bring, because it looks different. So for some of these things where you're seeing, this is what I think is happening in their life, this doesn't make sense, seek information or seek help, because there's so many people around here and so many resources that could help somebody. Not that we can force it on them, because we shouldn't, but like, just to let them know that there's a place for them, and that there's a place that cares and that loves. So that's my thought.
Yeah, so a real practical word on that. Did you know that in the student handbook, there's an amnesty clause for any kind of sexual assault or harassment? If you have a friend that's involved in something that, by our student handbook, they shouldn't be, so they're in a hotel with someone of the opposite sex, or they're at a party that's got a keg at it or whatever, and something happens, we're not going to suspend the student for being at a kegger. We're going to deal with the sexual assault and try to bring mercy and justice to that. So thank you, Kelly, for bringing that up. I'm excited by the practicality and effectiveness of Scripture, right? So why do we offer hospitality, and why do people have dignity? It's because they're made in the image of God, right? And why do we care about others? Because we're told to love our neighbor as ourselves, and to offer them dignity in that and hospitality in that. So again, we're in a great place where hopefully we're
not coerced. But I'd like to say a couple of things, if I may. I was hoping to have some time for Q&A, but come tomorrow so we can engage in conversation together. Okay? Please, if I can encourage you to do that. I have no way to incentivize you, most of you.
What time?
It's at 12:30 back here. But we're gonna get rid of all this stuff and have round tables where we can sit together and talk. So a few things that I want to say. Much of what we've said here tonight has been primarily to those of you who are walking alongside people who may have experienced something. But I want to come back to what we all believe, I think, and what Dan hinted at most directly just a minute ago, is that if you are sitting in your seat tonight and you find yourself in a place not of a friend walking alongside, but either as someone who has been a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault, or if through our conversation you are racking your brain saying, oh no, have I been a perpetrator of violence against another? Either way, I want you to hear this. The Christian... No, Siri. That's not what they want to hear. Siri, what should they hear? Timing, right? Unfortunately, in many evangelical circles, we think that the most true affirmation of Christianity, of all people, of all of humanity, is in Genesis 3. We are broken, fallen, sinful people, worms. But the most foundational affirmation that Scripture makes about human beings is that we, male and female, are created in the image and likeness of God. In fact, the authors and redactors of Genesis so desperately wanted us to remember that after Genesis 3, beginning of chapter 5, I think it is, the author comes back and says, now, don't forget that when God began to create, God created them in the image and likeness of God. So remember that. Cling to that. Because the redemptive work of God and through the Spirit and the community of God's people is to restore that image and likeness to you and to us. Okay, the second thing that I wanted to say is that some of our conversation may seem as though it was way off in left field from the actual topic, which was domestic violence and sexual assault. We're talking about football, we're talking about language, and we're talking about opening doors. But the reality is that all of these things shape us as a people so that it enables perpetuation of violence against another. And that's why we invite you into this conversation and say, okay, how can I might not be someone who is naturally given towards violent actions towards another or towards being willing to receive those. But we want as a community to pay attention to these things that might be at work in very small ways so that we can create a more robust culture here as a campus for helping people live into the dignity that they have been given as children created in God's image. We want to create an environment where we are helping people to claim their agency so that it can be used not in exploitative ways over others, but in service of others, to the glory of God and to the transformation of the world. So language makes a huge difference in that. Your willingness to receive and listen to the story of another makes a huge difference in that. How you comport yourself as you walk across campus and see, engage another person, whether you look at them through eyes that objectify them as some some mere commodity that meets your own desire, or whether you see them as someone who is an image bearer of God, all of these things slowly weigh up, build up, to create us as individuals and as a community into a place that will either be about the restoration of dignity or the destruction. That we will work against violence, assault, or will we be a place that enables it? So while the big is there, while the big topics of conversation are there, and they're hard at times, they are absolutely impacted by all of the minuscule decisions that you will make each and every day. Right? So pay attention. Pay attention to the promptings, to the moments of discontent, of conflict within you. Pay attention to these things, because it does make a difference. Thanks a lot for being here tonight, for taking your time and offering it to us. And join me in thanking our panel for all of that.